Well, hi everyone. My name is Faith Odom, and I serve as the Assistant Director on the Alumni Engagement and Inclusion Initiatives team. Welcome to our Admission Insights webinar series. Tonight's webinar focuses on finding the right advocates to ensure your students' recommendation letters highlight their strengths and achievements. These webinars are intended for informational purposes, and attendance has no bearing on admission to William and Mary. I want to take a moment to encourage you to be present and engaged in the webinar and ask questions as they may arise. Today, we're joined by Chris Hailey, class of 84, who also obtained a master's in 92 and is the parent of a class of 13 and class of 19 graduate. He serves as a college counselor at Hampton Roads Academy. Chris has spent many years as an educator working with students. His previous and current roles equipped him with the knowledge in writing recommendation letters and providing guidance to students and parents on how to navigate the process. I will now turn the webinar over to the hands of our admission professional, Chris.
Hi there. Thank you so much, Faith. I'm
Of
delighted to be
course.
with you all tonight. The reason that I'm here at all is because of my son, who is one of the assistant deans of admission at William and Mary, and he and I have a lot to talk about, of course, because of both of us having an interest in how college admissions work and how college counseling works. So it's been a big learning curve for me as I've been doing this. I'll just give you a little bit of background. Well, you can see that that's my license plate right there because that is our family, the William and Mary family, my wife, myself, my two children, my brother, my sister, my sister-in-law, and a bunch of other people. So we are a dedicated tribe family. And in fact, if over my shoulder, you might see that we have a whole wall of William and Mary and Williamsburg related things, including 4 different Crim Dell renderings. So we like that sort of thing. This is my 40th year teaching. My first 30 years were in public schools, mostly at Lafayette High School here in Williamsburg. And then for the last 10 years, I've been at Hampton Roads Academy, which I have absolutely loved. By the way, I should tell you that whenever any of my students walk into my room wearing a William Mary shirt, I'm sort of contractually obligated to say, "Go Tribe," which I absolutely do at every opportunity. Um, well, I feel like having been in both the public and independent school settings, I've had a pretty broad insight into how things work in the college admissions and college counseling process. I've only been a college counselor actually for 4 years, and now starting at the middle of this year, I'm going to be the assistant director of college counseling. One of the enormous benefits that we have at HRA is a brand new, by the way, dedicated college counselor who used to be at William and Mary. And then I'm her assistant. And we can do some things that we simply weren't able to do when I was at Lafayette High School. Certainly just having the time to devote to kids in a way that we didn't before. So it's enormously valuable. Now, I know that of all the people who have joined in tonight, there are going to be some folks from larger public schools, maybe smaller public schools, parochial, independent. You're coming from a bunch of different places with your students. So I'm going to try to address as best I can a variety of aspects of the process as we encounter it, and then especially, of course, our topic tonight is about recommendation letters. Um, at some point later, you will get an email with this slideshow in it, and I won't be clicking on links to raise them for you now, but I thought I would throw out first of all, and some of you will have already seen this, which is the most recent alumni magazine, which has a wonderful article on enrollment trends. Now, this isn't specifically about our topic, but I think that all of you might find that it's a useful way of learning about where William and Mary is, where schools around the country are in their thought process in how admissions works. Also, by the way, there's the very handsome coach of the Buffalo Bills, Sean McDermott, former William and Mary great, who is also profiled in the magazine. So I hope you'll check that out. So I want to start not with teacher recommendations, but I want to give you some sense of what I do as a college counselor, writing on behalf of the school as a whole. It's the official, if you will, recommendation of Hampton Roads Academy. Um, right now, I have a caseload that's relatively small. It'll probably increase a bit next year, but I write on behalf of the school. And so those kinds of things. Now, again, you're going to, I'm talking to an audience, I think, with a lot of different situations where your kids are. If you are in a large public school, you may be in the situation that my own kids were in, where they know their counselors, certainly, but they don't necessarily spend a lot of time face to face, nor do parents necessarily spend a lot of time face to face with college with the guidance counselor, because of course, in public schools, generally speaking, the guidance counselor role and the college counselor role is essentially blended. So when we write a counselor rec letter, we are focused on, among other things, the student's academic history, helping to explain why the student is taking the courses they're taking, why they may not be taking certain courses, something to really contextualize their whole experience. We also want to make sure that colleges know about maybe challenges that the students may have faced that could have impacted their achievement. And we want to add other things that simply aren't apparent to the reader by just what's on their transcript, or even what the student writes themselves or a teachers write. So because we are trying to write on behalf of the school, and because even as a college counselor who has a fair amount of interaction with the students, I always think that there's something more. There's always something I don't know. There's always something that I haven't seen in the hallways, on the athletic field, in my room. And for that, we ask rather parents at HRA to do what we used to call a parent rec letter, though I'm not sure that that's the best description of what it is. I'm going to be starting to call this a parent reflection. And the purpose of this is for parents to be able to just tell me something, as I say, something I don't know. And I must say that some of the most effective letters that I've written, at least I feel that they're most effective. The hook that I got, the something that to really hang the whole thing on has come from parents. I don't always get something great like that, but boy, when it works, it really works. And it really helps me to again, put a broader context on what the student is doing in school, out of school, and helps the admissions professionals really get a sense of who the student is. And that's the whole point of the application, of course, is to understand who the student really is through their writing, through our writing, through their teachers' recommendations. I would say, and I guess this really goes without saying, that as far as the counselors are concerned, if you're in one of those situations where they don't necessarily make time for every parent, every student as fully as they could, then it would certainly be well to make an appointment and see them whenever you can, preferably no later than the junior year, of course. By senior year, this train has left the station. This is just to show you, and again, there's a link that you'll get if you care to look at this document more closely. There's really not much to it, but this is what we ask parents to do. So it's, as it says, please tell a story about your child that captures the essence of who he or she is, etc. So if you care to see this more closely, you'll have the link to this particular piece of paper a little later on. Well, now we get to really what the title of this presentation is, which is about choosing the right advocate. So first, I should say that at HRA, we have a pretty standard procedure. We require students to ask two teachers for recommendations. we have them fill out a couple of different kinds of reflections. And again, you'll note there on the screen that there are two links that you'll see. I'll show you just a screenshot of what they look like. But again, it's really a matter of helping that person help you. The same thing with the college counselor's recommendation. Parents can help me help their student. Students can help when I've written teacher letters, which I also do. They can really be an enormous help to me by what they share with me. And I'll show you a little bit of that in just a moment. But to the point of who is it that you are going to seek out to do a letter for you? First, I think it's important to remember that you are asking for a recommendation. You're not demanding one. You're not saying, please, please, you're not begging. You're asking them. And that's important because you want to make sure that you're approaching teachers in the best possible way to get the kind of result that you were hoping for. So I think the first thing we think of is, well, I'm a science kid. I want the science teacher to write for me. I'm an art kid. I want the art teacher to write for me. And that may be an absolutely spot on, perfect thing to do. But I also want to make it clear that I think frequently the best letters come not from the teacher where you have a straight A and you're just the ace of the whole thing, but a place where, maybe you've had some challenges. And I hear students every day talking about, oh, wow, man, that AP stats quiz today just crushed. Oh, that was terrible. Oh my gosh. Well, the kid who starts out that way early in the year and makes a real comeback and really puts in the effort and goes to meet with the teacher and does everything that they need to do to get where they need to be, even if where they need to be isn't a straight A, but they've really shown commitment to it. That's a teacher who's going to remember the great things that you've been doing. So I would strongly urge students to think about not just what are your particular interests and do they mesh with a particular teacher, though that is important, but also think about who has challenged you, who have you felt really challenged by, but you met the challenge. And meeting a challenge, can mean different things to different kids. So that really was the title of the presentation in a nutshell, but I think that there's a lot more that we would want to know about this process. Oh, and I should have mentioned already, among other things that I think are very helpful are if you have teachers who not only know you in class, but also out of class. For example, among the many hats that I wear at HRA, I'm the sponsor for Model UN. And so I really get to know those Model UN kids very, very well. And in fact, all of them this year that are juniors or now seniors are on my caseload for that very reason, because I do know them well. It could be somebody who is both a teacher and a coach, somebody who's directed you in a play or whatever the case may be. But knowing a kid both inside and outside of class is really an enormously valuable thing from the teacher's perspective in how they go about writing a letter. So I'm actually jumping around a bit on what's on the screen here. How many letters do we need? Well, as I mentioned to you, HRA says 2, but that's just our standard. That has nothing to do with what every individual college may wish. I've linked here an article that I read just a few days ago from New York University. They only require 1 letter. Now, they're saying that you certainly can provide more than that, but they understand that it isn't always as easy for some kids to find 2 or 3 or however many recommenders. 1 is really all they need. And then I was stunned to find out that William & Mary doesn't actually require teacher recommendations. And yet, of course, essentially everybody does provide them. And my inside source says that 2 is really an ideal number. You can do more than that, but at a point, you're really not necessarily adding much more insight to what the staff will then know about your student. So that's sort of a rule of thumb. I think 2 is often a great number, but it isn't necessarily the only potential number. And by the way, here are the two different forms that we have used One of them we used up until this year, and the second one, this is a new one that we're using. And this is asking students to reflect on their own activity in the class. Again, helping the teacher help you. And so I really liked, and I think we may end up going back to the one that asks more specific questions. Why do I want you to write a letter on my behalf? What happened in your class that I thought was really meaningful? What do I remember? What was I excited about? What was challenging? I think those are great things for students to have to reflect on as they are asking a teacher for a recommendation. So for the however many of time I've said this, anything that can help the teacher or the counselor help you is worth doing. Now, this is the other form that we have been using more recently, a three adjective model. What are three adjectives that you think describe you, and provide some instances where that showed up. So that's sort of our process in a nutshell. It may be, and again, it's so dependent on your own school's requirements, recommendations to students about how to go through this process. When I was in public school at Lafayette, it was basically a kid just comes to me and says, "Would you write me a recommendation?" And I say, "Sure." Or in the very odd case, I might say something like, "I don't know if I'm the best person to write that recommendation," which is it has happened very rarely, but it has happened. But I would have felt really that I would have benefited if somebody had presented me with something like this. So I share this with you, not necessarily that you would want to or need to do this, but depending on the teacher situation, a student might offer this or something similar as part of their process of asking for that recommendation. And of course, you want to make sure that sort of input is actually welcomed, whether it's the counselor rec, as we talked about before, or whether it's this. It's good to be sure that they welcome that kind of input. So I also hear a lot of students asking about outside recommendations, somebody from outside the school. This can be useful, but I really think it's only especially helpful if the person that they're asking knows them in some very direct capacity, a mentorship, an internship, some extensive volunteering of some sort, a significant work experience, something like that. There are instances in which this is a picture of somebody who did an internship, obviously, with a doctor, and maybe they learn something about you that is truly helpful. But Sarah's a great kid. She comes over and pet sits for our cat. That's not a very helpful recommendation. We don't encourage the outside recommendation, but as I say, it's something that can be useful, but sparingly in very specific instances when it does add significant value. And of course, from the admissions officer's perspective, from these, and let's face it, these are generally young people, heavily overworked. There's so many applications to go through. More paper is not always helpful. And I think that almost any admissions officer would tell you the same thing. More paper isn't always the best thing. It's with the paper I do get, I want to really learn something about the student. I want to feel like I know who that student is, and whatever helps do that, that's what we want to present. So the one last thing that I think is worth thinking about is a little bit of etiquette. Now, again, every school will be a little bit different in how they approach this. We are very specific with students about you must do your requests by a certain date. You must have this form to the teacher by a date. You must have it back and brought to the college counseling office by a certain date. Now, again, every school has a different approach. But of course, giving teachers lots of lead time is always the best. We ask our students to make those requests back in April. Teachers then have essentially, the rest of the school year and through the summer to work on these. I'll tell you that I'm sure this is true in a lot of places. Our teachers of juniors, our English teacher and our American history teacher, get just bombarded with requests because they are seeing these students in the junior year. I teach mostly seniors. I teach AP government and some other courses. Um, and I don't actually get very many because most of the kids I'm seeing, I've only seen them during the senior year. This has already happened by then. But be aware of whatever deadlines your school is asking for. And if there aren't any specific deadlines, early is always the best approach. And as I mentioned before, remember that you are asking, and everyone likes to be asked nicely, of course. Now, we don't really need to have students following up with teachers because we have a very tight process and we have, as teachers, a very specific deadline. The kid asks you back in April, we need this letter uploaded by September 16th, I think is what it was this year. But if the student is unclear whether the letter has been written or when it's going to be turned in, it certainly doesn't hurt to say something like, hey, thank you again so much. I asked you back in April for that letter, and I really appreciate the fact that you took the time to do that for me. Is sort of a very gentle, soft way of checking in to make sure everything is as you hope it is. And I will tell you that as a teacher for a very, very long time, I think one of my favorite things in the world is a thank you note. And I get them, occasionally, not all the time. Sometimes they're at the end of the senior year and a student thanking me for whatever went on in class or thanking me for taking them on Model UN trips or whatever the thing may be. But I think it is really, really the right thing to do to thank teachers who have taken their time to write on your behalf. And just a simple handwritten note is so meaningful. I have a file in my desk. I have every single note that a student has ever written me at HRA. And it's getting to be a bigger file now because I've been around a while. So I hope that that all of that is useful to you. Again, every school, every situation is a little bit different. Ours is different from others. I hope that you have as good an experience with the counselors and teachers that your students are working with as I feel like we have been able to provide at HRA. I think we do a pretty solid job, and we want to certainly continue to do that. So at this point, I will hit the stop share button and be open to whatever questions may come. Oh, there we go. Hello again, Faith.
Hi. While we wait for people to bring questions in, I want to thank you. Everything you have said has been helpful. I also feel like it's a new perspective we haven't had in this webinar series yet. So thank you for providing the insight to us.
My pleasure. My pleasure indeed.
Well, I will start us off with a question if we don't have any funneling in right now. So you talked about the series of, I guess, deadlines that you have for students. Could you talk more about how parents can be helpful in those series of deadlines? Is it something that you share like in a parent's newsletter, or how
Oh,
can they get involved there?
no question. Well, I think that we do a good job of communicating with parents regularly. We actually start the college counseling process in the freshman year. Now, of course, at that point, we were only just sort of introducing some of the ideas. What are the things that you're most interested in? What do you want to follow up on that would be something that you might think about later? So we're just, we're starting to, dip a toe in the water a little bit. But as time goes by and each year goes by, we have a little something more and a little something additional. I'll be taking a group this Friday, as a matter of fact, on a college tour, a tour of 4 campuses. In fact, we're coming to William and Mary, not for a tour, but we have somebody who's going to do a nice presentation for our students. And I'm sorry to say that my son wasn't available to do the presentation, but oh well. Um, so we do communicate regularly, and I hope that all schools are doing this. But if you aren't hearing from a counselor by the middle of the junior year, you definitely would want to get in touch with them and just, touch base. So what can we expect? Do you have any deadlines? If they aren't being proactive, then that's a good time for you to start being proactive.
Thank you. Well, we have some questions rolling in. So if you can open them up and read them, great. If not, I can also be of assistance here.
Oh, okay. I have them open.
Oh, lovely.
Okay. I've got a great question right at the top here. How long should we
Don't we love
expect
it?
a recommendation letter to be? I want to go kind of back to that same thing that I said about not burying people in paper. Longer is not necessarily better. In fact, we have been encouraged as teachers to be succinct. One of the things that I do in my letters, um, they are 1 page. First of all, that's it, 1 page. There are a lot of counselors and teachers are now moving toward a I'm trying to remember the term for it, but effectively it's kind of bullet pointed. But a bullet point with an explanation, a bullet point with an explanation. And really from the reader point of view, keep in mind who the reader is. A young person who's probably overworked, has a million of these things to do, and you want to hit the highlights. So in fact, when I write, each paragraph that I write, I will bold a sentence that is the essence of this. And again, I've heard from informed sources that is helpful. So length is not the point. It's what can you tell me that I really need to know about your student? Does William and Mary have an end date for when they accept rec letters? To my knowledge, everything generally is sent as one package. I know that we do, and I know that we did that in public school as well. There'll be somebody, a registrar, who is the funnel for all of these things. Now, in a particular instance where, let's say, everything's been turned in, you've turned in, the teachers have turned in the letters, the application is going out for, in some case, well, if it might be an early decision, could be a regular decision, could be a rolling admissions, depending on the schools you're applying to. But I know that if, let's say, everything went out from your school on October 15th, but 2 weeks later, it occurred to you, there really is some more information that this person my child interned with could provide. I'm sure that William and Mary would be happy to accept it up to a point. I couldn't honestly tell you what exactly that would be, but they don't start reading applications. They're not, well, they might not get to yours for a little while after everything sort of rolls in. Okay. And then not directly related to the topic, but what thoughts do you have about SAT, ACT scores if they are optional? Every person that I've talked to about this has said, if we say optional, we mean optional. Sure, provided if you think it's going to give us another data point that we can use to help your child. But optional really does mean optional. So when is it useful? The first thing that you should probably do is simply look for what is the middle 50% score of either ACT or SAT. Obviously, I mean, it goes without saying that the most competitive colleges, that number is going to need to be higher. I mean, I don't want to go saying the names of colleges exactly, but an extraordinarily competitive, prestigious college that shall not be named, if you have, I'm going to say a 1300 or something like that, that's probably not helpful because almost certainly their middle 50% starts way higher than that. So if it's not in the middle 50 and preferably in the upper half of that, you probably are best just to leave it be. Regarding the personal statement from a parent to help a counselor, writing a recommendation letter, should parents offer this proact? Oh, okay. This is a great question. Should you do this proactively or wait to see if they request it? Um, if it is late in the junior year, for example, and you haven't really heard anything about this, that might be a good time to see if this is something that they would welcome. Who knows? Not everybody would necessarily welcome the information. Again, as much as Laura, if they happen to have a very large caseload, they might find that that's the most helpful thing, or maybe they don't. But it's just something that we want to be judicious about. As would this be helpful to you? I could provide you some information if you think that that would make your job easier. What do you think? But really, those counselors are probably writing letters, as I did a lot of that over the summer. So before the summer, before the senior year starts, would be really the time to make that contact if you haven't already, sometime in the spring, as part of just whatever contact you're going to have with the counselor. That would be a good time to do it. And let's see, what would your advice be if your kids asked someone to write a recommendation and they said yes? Can I'm not sure if I understand. What would your advice be if your kid asks someone to write a recommendation and they say yes, you can write it and I'll sign it? Ooh, that seems like a bad idea. Like, I cannot imagine why you would want to do that as a teacher. That seems, first of all, that would be extraordinarily unprofessional from my perspective. That's somebody who doesn't know you well and probably wasn't the right person to ask to begin with, if that's their response. Pardon me if that sounds like a very hardcore answer, but I just can't imagine anybody that I have interacted with in my profession doing that. That just doesn't seem like a very professional approach. Let's see here. If I go to a very large public school where my counselor has hundreds of students on her caseload, how can my counselor's recommendations stand out since we don't get the opportunity to interact much? Well, I think that is the exact point at which you offering that parent reflection, parent recommendation, that's when it becomes especially helpful. I know that at Lafayette, I mean, we had some extraordinarily hardworking, really good people who always said, I wish I had more time to devote to these kids, and especially to the kids who are maybe the first generation kids or the kids who don't know the process, whose maybe their parents haven't been through this process. It's sometimes hard for us to remember that not everybody has a parent at home who has already done this or done this with another child or something like that. There's a lot of folks who are coming to us, and particularly in public schools, but also occasionally even at HRA, they don't have that kind of sort of automatic guidance at home. So back to this idea about the large caseload, that is a person that I would really want to have a direct face-to-face meeting or Zoom meeting or whatever they can do, and offer them, look, here's some context I can give you. Here's some information I can give you that really could be of use. Would you welcome it? And I think that's probably the best approach. Let's see, do we have anything else in the queue? We have no further open questions. I'll give it a moment if anybody else wants to toss something out there.
You took the words right out of my mouth. Yes, we'll give it a few more minutes to see if we have any more lingering questions. I've sent a message in the chat just thanking everybody for asking such great questions and being engaged with us tonight.
And while the point of this whole thing, as Faith mentioned earlier, being part of this or not being part of this has nothing to do with admissions at William & Mary. But let me just tell you that as a proud graduate, as all of you I know are who are listening, I hope that William & Mary turns out to be a fit for your kids the way it was for my daughter, who did her undergrad at William & Mary, and for my son who went to Clemson, which is okay with me. We got to be big Tigers fans because of that. But then came back to Williamsburg, and he always considers William & Mary if you look up his his little blurb on the William and Mary website, it says, William and Mary was always my school, even if I didn't go there. Because he's a townie and he's been to lots of basketball and football games, as have we. So go Tribe. Oh, here we are. We have another one. In the NYU application advice you mentioned, it says letter of recommendation from a teacher, counselor, coach, supervisor, or anyone else in a position of authority. Would you recommend choosing one of those in particular? Is an academic teacher the standard option? Um, well, if you're only trying to choose one of all, and I would imagine that virtually every school is going to be doing a counselor rec anyway. So it's not something you would have to necessarily ask for. But and of course, now NYU is obviously a very competitive school. I think that they would like to hear from a teacher who is probably in the academic realm. But if you're an artist, you're a musician, that's what you're going to school for. You'd want to hear from those people. If, on the other hand, you're a math science person or whatever it may be, maybe those people are the ones to pick if you're only going to do one or two. But again, NYU is saying you only have to have one, but that's not a limit. So again, I always sort of go toward that sweet spot, which is two, plus you're going to get one from your counselor anyway. And with their and anyone else in a position of authority, I think is sort of a thing like that kind of depends on what kind of school are you coming from? Are you coming from a very small school where everybody knows the principal? And maybe you can ask the principal or something like that. But I don't know that, if you're in a somewhat larger school and you have lots of people to choose from, then, everything else that I said about choosing somebody really, really pertains there. And how much weight do letters of recommendation have in the admission packet? Well, again, I'm not an admissions officer, but I'll tell you what I have heard from a lot of different people, which is it's an additional data point. That's a phrase I hear a lot. It's an additional data point. It's something more that I don't know from just your transcript. They're especially helpful when they give context for something that isn't apparent. Look at these junior year grades. Wow, those weren't so good. And maybe the student does, or maybe they don't share with you there was some kind of serious struggle going on during that time. And yet, here they came back and they did better. Those are the kinds of things that help an admissions person really get to know your student. But I would also say that it is an extraordinarily rare thing for a yes to become a no or a no to become a yes just because of a rec letter. That would be pretty unusual. I mean, if you had an otherwise, fine looking admissions packet, and then somebody writes one that says, this kid is a problem, and here's why they're a problem. Now, that's pretty unlikely that you would get that. But if you did, you should pay attention as an admissions officer. But, if I had a kid that I thought was that I couldn't say something, the old thing, don't say anything if you can't, don't say anything at all. If you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. I have only once that I can recall said to a kid, I don't think I'm the right person to write for you. That's a way of saying you're not going to get what you want from me. But again, to the point of how much weight it's an impossible thing to say with any accuracy. But I like to write the best letter I can to give the best impression I can of a kid that I really believe in. And that's a good thing, good feeling for me to know that I'm presenting a kid in the best light, which I try very much to do without, polishing the apple too much. So that looks like that is about, I think we have at this point run out of questions. This has been fun. Thanks, Faith, for looping me into this thing. This is great, and I hope folks got a little something out of it.
Thank
And of course,
you for joining us. I'm happy you had a good time. I always love to work events when we can have a good time and still get something done. So I'm hoping our participants learned a lot from you. I learned something from you, and I'm happy that you've enjoyed your experience here.
Right. And as my contract requires, I have to close by saying, go try.
Thank you, Chris. We have a few housekeeping things before I let you all go. First, I will be sharing Chris's PowerPoint with you all in the survey you have tomorrow. I will also be sharing a link to the recording for this webinar so that you can play it back. Hopefully you took notes, but if you didn't get a chance to take notes, you'll have access to the webinar and it'll live on our Admission Insights webinars page, which I can be sharing with you now. And in addition to that, we have another webinar coming up November 12th where we talk about college essay tips with alumna Raven Baytops, class of, I want to say 2016. And so I'm excited and I hope you all join us there too. And without further ado, oh, of course, you're welcome. Somebody in the Q&A told us thank you. Yeah, and there's no further questions and all hearts and minds are clear. I will let you all go and have a great evening. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.